we have a presentation on transforming care, and that will be led by Tracy Bridgman, Melinda Robinson and Tom Moore. They will introduce themselves, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, and as I say, yeah, welcome everyone. You can come forward if you want. I think we're not a massive crowd. So I'm Tom Moore. I work for Surrey County Council. I'm a commissioning manager there, mainly based in East Surrey, and with the county lead for autism. Hello. On that, I'm also a member of the Surrey Positive Behaviour Support Network, and a member of our Transforming Care Partnership in Surrey. So, what we're going to do today is just talk, not give you a comprehensive view of what's happening in Transforming Care in Surrey, but just talk you through an overview of it and then some particular bits of work here. So, my part of this is really just to set the context for it. So, to start with, is everyone aware of Transforming Care as a national programme?
Yeah.
Is anybody not aware of Transforming Care as a national programme? Great. So I can my first couple of slides, which is I will talk a little bit about that one. I mean, we know in Surrey, so the Transforming Care programme is sort of post-Winterbourne view, is looking at trying to make sure people aren't hospitalised inappropriately and come out of hospital in a timely way and supported well in the community to facilitate that. We do know, we know through experience in Surrey that it has happened that people have been hospitalised. Sometimes people have gone into hospital because of a crisis that happens in their life, and it's appropriate, it's to do with their mental health, they get the treatment, they're discharged. But we do know that there have been cases where people have been sectioned, people have gone into inpatient settings, basically because things around them have fallen apart. And we had Pete McGill's talk earlier on for people who were here about that. I mean, those kinds of things, where the stuff around them have changed, there have been changes in their environment around that have led to a breakdown, and the breakdown in that service has led to this inappropriate hospitalisation. A lot of the work is trying to prevent that, so to stop people inappropriately going into hospital, as well as provide routes out back into the community for people who are in hospital. So what government have done, they've done a series of consultations and some weighted documents that have come out. The only one, the thing that I've put up here is the service model, just to give an indication of what we're trying to achieve here. So you've got the individual at the centre, and the whole gamut of work around the individual to try and support the individual to stay connected in their community with their family, friends, links that they have already. Some of this, why do we need a national programme for this? It's kind of, we've been talking about this for decades, really. I had a Mansell report way back, and then the second one, and so on and so on and so on. And I think part of it is very difficult to deliver, and some of what's different this time is that there is a real national weight and a national drive, and it's genuine from government to make it happen. Still slow, still difficult, but who are we talking about here? So who's included in the Transforming Care work? So there are 6 cohorts. It's quite well defined, and I think sometimes people have in their heads a picture of who's included, and it's worth knowing who's actually included. I think, I'm not going to go, I haven't put it up in detail here, but it's worth checking out in the documentation who is in. So it includes the common thread through all the groups of people who have challenging behaviour, whose behaviour can challenge our services. But it's people who have a learning disability or autism or both. They may have mental health needs additionally, but may not. It can be people who are who perhaps the needs related to their particular conditions that they have are not as high, but they would be included because of the difficult circumstances that they live in, or the challenging upbringing that they have had, so that puts them then at risk of being in touch with the criminal justice system. So it's people. So it's quite a broad group of people, and also, sorry, I work in adult services, and so I tend to default into that position. But it includes all ages. So it's children, young people who are in 52-week residential educational provision, relating to challenging behaviour. So it's quite a broad group of people that we're talking about. But talking about that there is a big push from central government for this to happen, they've linked it to reducing commissioning inpatient beds, which there's a lot of money in that. And the money then is supposed to filter through to services, to deliver these services in the community. So there's as a national driver, I mean in Surrey, we are, so the southeast here, we have the reduction required is lower than other parts of the country because we have already, we have a low number of people in inpatient services, but we still do have people who are in inpatient services who shouldn't be there, and we still do have a regular number of people who go inpatient and who essentially shouldn't. At the same time as this, so we're talking about cohorts of people who should be supported in the community, who have been in hospital, should be coming back to the community. At the same time, there's a pressure on services also, in adult services. Young children and young people in Surrey, we're seeing data that shows we've got increasing numbers of people on the autism spectrum, and increasing numbers among those of people who have the most complex needs. So there is a requirement from services in the community to get better at all this stuff, to get better at supporting these individuals. So what are we doing about that in Surrey? So we've got this is our Transforming Care plan, which is published, so you can see it online. It's on the Partnership Board website. And we've got these 8 work streams. Again, there's a lot of work going on under each one, and I've got to be quick. So I'll very, very briefly go through each one of those though. So in the service development one, we're looking at providers being able to work together in Surrey. So providers who support people with the kinds of needs we've talked about, support them well. Those providers being able to work together in a more collaborative partnership kind of a way. I think sometimes the system's set up so that provider organisations are expected to act as competitors in the market, and I think to support individuals like this, we need people to be working together around them. So there's pieces of work around that, and colleagues are going to talk about that later. Workforce development, there's a piece of work looking at what roles and how many people and what kind of work is happening currently and needs to happen for these groups of people in health services, in social care services, in provider services in Surrey. Prevention, information, advice, advocacy. There's been a lot of work getting information online about transforming care and related subjects of supporting positive services for this group of people. Again, on the Learning Disability and Autism Partnership Board websites, you can find a lot of updated information there. Relet the advocacy contract in Surrey, again ensuring people are included. Estates, massive challenge in Surrey is finding accommodation for people who may not always be the easiest neighbours, who might need some significant space, who might not want to share with other people often, and property in Surrey is massively expensive, so it's been a real challenge in that. So we've got a work stream looking at that. We've had some successful bids in for money from NHS England Department of Health to develop property for this purpose, and generally trying to work with partner organisations who have housing or who access and can support us getting hold of housing for these groups of people. So a lot of work there. Quality. Part of the Surrey Transforming Care Plan has been to try and develop some standards that we can agree across Surrey in general for supporting people in these cohorts. And what we're trying to do as well is link that to another set which look in more detail at positive behaviour support. So there's something about the general standards needing to be plain English enough, simple enough, straightforward enough for frontline services to use and be useful in an everyday way. But trying to link that to something that possibly might be a bit more technical that relates to positive behaviour support. So that's work in progress. Funding again is it's another. I said earlier on, I said at the beginning, it's been really difficult to deliver this, and there's lots of things that can block it, and funding is one of them. And it's not that the money isn't there; it's just where the money gets spent, really. And so it's trying to make sure that the work is done in a planned enough way, and that budget holders are aware of what's happening, and that the funding is in the right place at the right time. All of which is a great aspiration, and we're working on it. The Building the Right Support work stream is about it's about, I suppose, a couple of related pieces of work. One is part of Transforming Care nationally says we should have, as local areas, we should have a dynamic register of people who are either who need to come out of inpatient services or who are at risk of going into inpatient services, and we're sort of looking at that on a kind of red, amber, green kind of a basis, scoring people on that, and and it's dynamic in that we can be aware of somebody potentially moving towards a crisis, and trying to make sure that the right services are in the group talking about this and can focus intensive support around that individual. And that they won't always be on the verge of a crisis. So that's the idea. They will be supported intensively and can stay and make more robust their current community place. People don't go into hospital. That work again, it's really difficult to deliver. There's lots of different organisations that hold information about people. There's, quite rightly, people's information is confidential, but the kind of information and governance rules around that make it really quite difficult to do. But we've made a lot of progress in that. Some good work there. The other part of that work is looking at care and treatment reviews, which are kind of like a review for somebody, but a very intensive, holistic look at somebody to support them coming out of hospital. But again, we're doing a lot of work on care and treatment reviews in the community to stop people having to go into hospital. There's a lot of work on making sure those happen, making sure the right people are involved and aware and so on. There's a lot of work there. And there's SEND, so for children and young people, there's the work about trying to make sure that those community options are available in children's services, and that in terms of the way that the whole service system talks about what is the future for young people, that they're looking at positive community-based options rather than assuming that people will, the best place for someone is this sort of super expert service up the other end of the country that they will go to and move on to the adult equivalent. So those are the areas of work in a nutshell, very quickly. Following that, Tracy, do you want to go and talk about?
Okay, so just to follow on from Tom, to explain how we're working specifically in Surrey. Obviously, Transformed Care is a national agenda, and every county has its different challenges. So this is very specific to Surrey. So what happened was, all providers operating in the field of learning disabilities and autism were invited to submit an application to see if they wanted to work with Surrey on their Transformed Care agenda, which we did, and the providers. We were required to really evidence what we did to support, promote, and really advocate for individuals in the Transforming Care agenda. It was a bit like a mini tender, really. So, and the 7 of us were selected to work together. We were brought together, and the 7 were selected for Choice Care Group, Consensus, Care Management Group, CMG, Dimensions, Avenues, NAS, and Craigmore Priory. And so we had a meeting, didn't we, ages ago now it seems, and we were told, right, think differently, think out of the box, don't think about how we've always done it, because we're going to want to change things, really shake it up a bit. And so we obviously had a lot of discussions. We've obviously got our own individual organisations and commercial sensitivities, but I think actually we have managed to come together as 7 different organisations and worked really well, maintaining our own identities, but also helping each other out and supporting one another. Because at the end of the day, if somebody's referred to us, be it Consensus or to Choice or to Dimensions, we just want the best for that individual. And it's so much more satisfying if we can find a solution. And if it's not with our own organisation, that's fine. Because if we know that individual is then on the road to recovery and their family happy, that's basically what it's all about. I'm not really aware of any other local authorities that are working in this way other than Surrey. I think it works from what I've seen. I don't know about you guys, but yeah. It's broken down the barriers, and we're all communicating with each other a lot better. So as I said, we were told to think creatively how we can all work in partnership, and we were basically asked to design and create a sustainable care system that would meet the needs of individuals at every stage of their life. So for someone coming out of hospital, they may need a period in residential care. They may go straight to supported living. Everybody changes, we're continually changing. The lifestyles and the environments we lived, all of us lived in at 19, won't be the same we live in now or when we're 80. And it's the same for people with learning disabilities. So we need to create this menu of services. Our main brief was to work together to make sure that people do not remain in hospital any longer than necessary, and where possible, avoid a hospital admission in the first place. And how we could work together to provide proactive and responsive approaches to individuals who were either at risk or of being in crisis, or were in crisis as we speak. And most importantly, it's to help people to remain living at home with the family, in their own homes, but within their own areas, where they have their friends and their social contacts, close to family and friends. That's a tricky one in Surrey. Going back to some of the things that Tom said, obviously it's a large county, housing is very expensive, recruitment's difficult, but that's what we've got to find a solution to this somehow. So every Monday afternoon, there's a weekly clinical meeting, and this is attended by Surrey and Borders Foundation Trust Inpatient Services. And if I've missed anybody off this, I sincerely apologise. And represented as psychiatry, psychology, speech and language therapy, OT, and the intensive support team. There's healthcare planners, there's continuing healthcare commissioners, adult social care, continuing CCG commissioners, provider representatives, so that's one of the 7, will always be there, one of the Surrey 7. Of course, the magnificent 7, but we don't really know. I've been going for Craig while prior were going, Dimensions are now going as well. So, and then what we do is we share the information as much as we possibly can. And we try and get other people, maybe someone from CAMS, we've had people from the criminal justice system coming along. You know, people are going to be entering all sorts of different agencies when they're in crisis, and we need everyone in Surrey to know what this transforming care group's all about. So what happens at these meetings? There's a register of transforming care people, and we discuss each of these. They are red, amber, green, and so obviously we concentrate on the people that are red or amber. New cases can also be presented by a social worker who comes along who's got somebody who's potentially going into crisis. And we also discuss any new referrals that the intensive support team have referred to them, because again, they're potentially people that could be going into crisis. And it may be that the intensive support team have put some support into the family home, and things have settled down, and that's fabulous. That's, you know, they then can go to a green on the register. It means that, you know, they're not going to go off a list, but they're sorted. So at the meetings we discuss whether there's a need for a blue light meeting for the individual, or a CTR needs to be arranged. If their placement or where they're living looks to be at high risk, or they look to be at high risk of needing a hospital admission. Again, as I just said, we discuss whether a referral needs to be made to the IST to maintain the person's current living situation. It doesn't, just because somebody is brought up at the Monday meetings, it doesn't instantly mean they need a new placement. The first thing is to look at how we can maintain their current situation, because they're obviously in distress, but to lose the comfort of the environment they live in that they know would obviously cause more distress. However, if a placement is required, if it looks like the current placement is not going to work for whatever reason, the individual just is rejecting it, or they may have gone into hospital and their previous placement is refusing them to come back, then we would complete an assessment. And this is where one of the idea is that one provider of the Surrey 7 completes an assessment and shares it with the other 6, and then the best possible option is put forward for the care manager, family, individual to consider. That way, family hasn't got 7 different people coming to ask them the same questions over and over. And you know, you've got 7 providers, you've got 7 times more chance of getting the right placement for them. We also draw up plans, and it might involve approaching other individual agencies. Maybe it's the housing department, maybe someone just, they're not, the placement may be breaking down, or maybe they need some employment support, or even forensic services might be referred to. And all actions are recorded on the Transforming Care Register, and cases are marked that's closed, as positive outcomes are achieved for each of the individuals. But they remain on the register, but they're green. That's that one, because I was going to fill it in with something, but I obviously didn't. So that's what we do within Surrey, and as I said, I think it's working really well. It's work in progress. It's definitely, there's things we could be doing better, and we're meeting regularly all the time to discuss how we can improve things. But Ender's now going to talk about how the process has helped, and actually, a case study of someone.
Stick with the blank screen. Right, unfortunately, I have no slides. No, don't worry about that. Yep, I did have some slides. But unfortunately, we had a bit of to and fro. We sent a long presentation in, but anyway, I'm Belinda from Consensus, and I'm hopefully going to bring what Tom and Tracy have talked about a little bit to life. I'm going to share with you a case study about a real person called Robert that we support currently, and I recently had the opportunity to start to get to know Robert, and I spent some time with him. I spent some time talking to his mum Jackie, and I spent some time talking to the team who are supporting him at the moment. And what has really struck me is how quickly someone's life can unravel and things can go wrong. And Jackie, Robert's mum, was really keen that I share this with you, so that if you are supporting people, you think about some of the things that can go wrong, and how quickly things can go wrong, and think about trying to avoid some of those things going wrong. So Robert has autism, he has a learning disability as well, and something that's really, really important to Robert is keys. He carries with him at all times a bunch of keys, which include the key to his car. And that's really important to Robert, and he uses those keys as his cue for communication. So when he wants to speak, he starts with talking about his keys and then moves on to what he wants to say. And that is really, really important to him. So we first got to know Robert when he was actually living in an inpatient unit a long, long way from his mum Jackie. And how he had got into that inpatient unit is really important to share. So Robert was living in a residential home. His life was going quite well. He was doing lots of things that he enjoyed. He had his keys and he was using them as his communication. One day, he went to the swimming pool with his support staff, had a lovely session swimming. He really enjoyed swimming. It was one of his weekly activities that he did. Every week he went swimming. When he got out of the swimming pool, staff that were supporting him got into a bit of a flap. You know how it is when you're supporting somebody? Did you have the keys? No. Did you have them? No. Somehow they had mislaid the car keys and therefore Robert's keys. Robert overheard this and he started getting really, really anxious. Those keys are really, really important to Robert. You know, if you lose your car keys, it's quite stressful, isn't it? But if that's also your means of communication, that's doubly stressful. So he was getting really, really stressed. Luckily, the keys were found, staff got home. But because Robert was quite stressed while they were out, they wrote up an incident form when they got back home. And the manager looked at it and reviewed it. With the best of intentions, not wanting to create stress, said, I know, good idea is, let's not give Robert the keys anymore. Okay, I can tell from your faces you know where this is going. So, poor Robert now had lost his means of communication, lost something that was really important to his life. You know how people with autism often like a fiddly? And actually, don't we all? Don't we all have some sort of thing that is our little comfort that keeps us going, helps us through life? And he had lost that. So he just got more and more stressed. He got more and more anxious. He couldn't communicate with people. They weren't hearing what he was saying. And gradually he stopped doing the activities he was enjoying. Mum was visiting as often as she could. She could see he was getting more and more unhappy. What was going on? And he just withdrew, he just withdrew because he was sad, he was unhappy, and people weren't listening to him and he wasn't able to communicate with him. Unfortunately for Robert, after this had continued for quite a while, he just reached the end of his tether. And his key worker, who he was very close to and very fond of and had a good relationship with, wasn't listening to him one day. Robert snapped and he bit his key worker. And really, for those of you who were in Peter's session earlier, don't attribute that challenging behaviour from Robert to him as an individual. It's the whole context of his situation that he was in that led to that happening. And of course then the police were called, Robert was whisked away, and before he knew it he was under section in an inpatient unit, a long way from home. Then he got moved to another inpatient unit that was also a long way from his home, taken off section, but there were no plans put into place. This was a while back, before the Transforming Care agenda was really sort of picking up on these things, making sure people were getting their reviews, that discharge plans were starting happening. So he was lost. He was lost in a hospital. And Robert's family were really, really sad, and Robert was really, really sad, not surprisingly. And that's when we came on board, because Mum started getting on the telephone, seeing if anybody close to where she lived had somewhere where her son could live, and started a bit of a campaign to get him back out of hospital. We had a place, we said, yep, let's go and get to know Robert, and let's see what we can do. And luckily his care manager agreed, and we started some work for him to move. So Robert came to live in one of our support services, and initially when Robert came to live with us, he was still quite sad and still quite unhappy. And that was because, as a coping mechanism, when Robert lived in hospital, he'd developed his own routine that worked for him. And he would stay up all night watching television, because most people weren't around at night time, and in the day he slept. We thought long and hard and had a lot of conversations with Jackie, Robert's mum, with our positive behaviour, our local positive behaviour practitioner, who works with our own internal positive behaviour support team, and with the care manager. And we had thought long and hard about what routine to try and create for Robert when he moved. Because for those of you who have experience of people with autism, often a new environment's a good opportunity to set up a new routine, isn't it? But Robert was so sad and so unhappy, but was settled in his routine. We decided we'd take the risk and move him with that same routine, and then look at slowly doing some work with him and breaking that down and moving him on. But of course he wasn't really very happy when he first moved, and we needed to do something about that to improve things for him. So we did two things really. So we coupled positive behaviour support with some really good person-centred planning. We spent a lot of time getting to know Robert, getting to know his family. We had a core team of staff, just a small group of staff working with him. They wrote down everything. Every time they supported him, they wrote it down, what they were learning from his support, what worked, what he liked. Mum was invaluable as well, because she knew him really well, and she really helped us to start to think about what we could do to make him happy again. So before his move, we spent some time thinking about how we could create a place of safety for Robert when he moved. And we identified that getting his bedroom nice, comfortable, an environment he had things in that he liked and that he enjoyed, to create that as a safe space for him was really, really important. So we did that, and it was a place where he could relax and unwind, and we knew if he needed a break, when we started to sort of challenge him a bit and encourage him to do a bit more during the day, he had a safe place that he could withdraw to. The other key thing that was really, really important is we needed to spend some time making sure that we understood every aspect of Robert's communication. And it wasn't just about making sure he got the keys back. You know, it was about understanding all the little nuances about things he was indicating to us so that we really fully understood how he was communicating with us, how we should be responding, and how we could communicate with him as well. And so we make sure now that Robert has his car keys. That is a given. And we have that documented so that the whole staff team go off with flu. Whoever comes in to support knows that is the most important thing for Robert, that that is how he communicates. And we recognise when Robert is feeling stressed, and we let him have some space. And we also, such an important thing that we don't always manage to do with people with learning disabilities, when he says no, we recognise that that means no, and we let him say no. And that's really, really important. So where are we now, a year down the line? And Robert's life looks really, really different. So a year ago, he was still repeating his hospital routine, staying up all night watching television, spending the day in bed. Now, we've taken a very, sort of some of the proactive things we've done is make sure that we've introduced things at a pace that he was very comfortable with, planned very carefully how we were going to do it, thinking about the right times of day, to try and ensure success. So when we've been supporting him to try new activities, we've tried to make sure those were successful. But we had our reactive strategies ready as well. So we risk assessed each activity we were going to try with him, and we had an exit strategy so that we knew if we needed to, we could step away from an activity. But now Robert has a lot of things to do during the week. He has a full and active timetable. He has it on his wall in his room, in picture format, so he knows what he's doing every day of the week. And when he was in hospital, he'd actually sort of forgotten quite a number of things that he used to do. And so we've reintroduced some of the things he used to do, making a sandwich, making a cup of tea, and he's now doing some of those things again. He sees his mum and his other family members. His sister's just given birth, and he sees his mum and his family members on a very regular basis and spends lots of time with them and speaks to them on the phone regularly as well, which wasn't something he had done before. He's made friends with people he lives with, but he has a better social life than me. He goes to 2 local social clubs, and what's great is he's built some really good relationships there, and they're social clubs that are for anybody, not just for people with learning disabilities. He's known in his local pub. They've got his drink on the counter, just as he's pretty much going in. And when they recently changed the menu and took his favourite meal off the menu, the chef came out, had a chat with him, said, "That's no problem, I'll put curry back on the menu for you." So he's really, really established in his community. And most importantly, he sleeps again at night because he's busy and active and he's enjoying his day. So you can get people's life back, but what a shame that he had to go through all those difficult times before we could get things back on an even keel for him. The challenge for us is making sure that we keep him on that even keel and make sure that we don't accidentally or deliberately start putting things in place that will make things go wrong again. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Tom, and I think we're going to make you guys do some work now.
We are. Unless anybody's got any questions based on any of that?
I'm just curious how he first responded when he first saw the keys being given back.
I think,
Just out of curiosity.
I think it was a little bit of disbelief, and it's like, am I really allowed those? And we coupled it with saying, would you like to go out in your car? And initially it was just for a drive, and then making sure he had the keys back. So I think it took him a while to actually trust that we were giving him them back and he was keeping them. I think one of the sad things, which kind of relates to this, is he's always refused swimming since, which used to be a really favourite activity, and he's just like, if we offer swimming, it's a definite no-no. So, and I think that sadly will probably always be I know, but now he, those keys are very much his, and he knows that now.
Any more for any more? The information that we talked about earlier, that's the link for it, and I think these slides will be circulated.
The full set side, yeah.
The full set of slides. The full set of slides. You'll see some new ones when you get them.
I've got some nice easily pictures.
Yeah, that's great.
So you'll be able to get it, but this is basically that much. That's the Learning Disability and Autism Partnership Board's website, surreypb.org. So come and have a look there. And if you want to get in touch with any of us, that's where we are.